All right, we've been recently talking about cetylpyridinium and chloride and essential oil mouthwashes. So today we figured we'd do some formula forensics, mouthwash style. Hello again, I'm Dr. Rob, and alongside me is Tami, my co-host, and you're listening to Dental Formulator's Playbook.
I see we're going to talk about relatively popular brands. Why is that?
Yeah, that's easy. First, they are sold by reputable companies who likely have satisfied testing requirements. They understand the regulations, they understand the testing. They have a lot to lose, so they better get it right. This isn't just a startup, or just a small business. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but the likelihood of errors is going to be greater, right?
Hmm.
And so, second of all, it goes back to those startups and the smaller companies. This is an important baseline, and it can help those companies have a better understanding, or any, formulator, whatever. I see in academic circles, especially whenever they publish a paper, they're always talking about, I wish the manufacturers of these mouthwashes would have more transparency about the ingredients. Well, the ingredients are there, they're on the panel.
Indeed.
You just have to take the time and think about why they are there. And you have to consider that not everything is going to be protected with a patent. Some things are going to be trade secreted,
Yes.
and then some things are always going to be retained as a formulation secret. And so that's why we're doing this today. Yeah, we're bringing out some of the bigger brands just initially. We won't always do that, but that's what we're doing today.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Even if other mouthwashes may taste good, it doesn't help much to talk about a product that hasn't undergone much testing.
Absolutely, that's right. I mean, if you don't have the safety test, and we're not just talking about efficacy tests, we're even talking about safety tests. What does safety even mean? Meaning, is the acidity so much that it's going to demineralize your enamel? Is it going to cause unnecessary burdens in your mouth? Or probably the biggest one is microbial contamination.
Yes,
You know,
most definitely.
bacteria, molds, yeast, viruses,
Yes.
all of this stuff is able to be transmitted from the air, from our touch, from our hand, even from our mouth. I mean, this is why you typically don't want to share your toothbrush with somebody, but some people may share the same toothpaste. Every time you put the toothpaste on the
True.
toothbrush, there's a risk that not only from air, but also any microbes from the toothbrush will be admitted into the tube, especially, and again, this is mostly with concerns over water-based formulations.
Okay.
So I think that that's important there.
Okay. Well, you've assembled quite an array of mouthwashes. Where should we start?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're watching this with video, you'll be able to see that we have about four mouthwashes here. We're going to be talking about them today. But if you're only audio, then that's fine. We're actually going to use the names of the products, so that you should be able to follow along too. But one of the first ones that we were going to talk about is going to be Listerine. I have two mouthwashes here. I have one that's Cool Mint. They're both actually Cool Mint, but one of them is labeled antiseptic and one of them is labeled zero alcohol. So we're going to be talking about some of those differences in
Okay.
detail.
That sounds good. But wait, I have a question. What is the background of Listerine? I mean, all of these mouthwashes still use the term Listerine. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So Listerine is actually named in honor of an English doctor named Joseph Lister. Now, mind you, Lister, the doctor, did not create the Listerine brand. It was just a testament to him. And so the reason why anybody would even have any kind of, homage, if you will, to Joseph Lister is because he's the one that started in 1862 thereabouts to use
Mm.
carbolic acid to help treat infections in the human body. Without that, sepsis might kick in. Sometimes it would lead to amputations, especially, if there was any kind of military involvement, with the wounded soldiers or whatever. But, and obviously some health conditions can also, lead to lesions and such, and then, whatever. But there wasn't a great way to treat these kinds of things. Now, Lister always credited the germ theory pioneer, as many of you might already know, at least the name Louis Pasteur, right? With providing the fundamental understanding of the existence and the activity of microbes. So while Lister used carbolic acid, and by the way, carbolic acid is one of the solvents that you can get from petroleum whenever it's
Okay.
distilled, but Listerine never had carbolic acid in there.
Does this Listerine have carbolic acid?
No, none of them did. They never did, and they still never will. So what they do have, though, are some other ingredients that may sound familiar. So the Lambert Pharmacol company originally sold Listerine. They marketed this as an antiseptic, okay, but it had a different composition and it included a blend of eucalyptus oil, which it's still in there today, right? Wintergreen oil, also there, but they use borobenzoic acid and they use some other ingredients. I think they were hoping to use the name Lister again as a testament, as an homage to Joseph Lister. But this all kind of overlapped. Lister was in the 1860s doing a surgical thing, and then Listerine, through this company, Lambert Pharmacol, had also produced products, and this was going to help. But what was it going to help necessarily the mouth? No, it was really just going to be an antiseptic for just the general body. Like if you had cuts or scratches or sores. Maybe some people would use alcohol or peroxide today, right, in your bottle, if that was going to be what you used besides soap and water. But this was also marketed specifically, and it was used by doctors to address female hygiene.
Okay. Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What made them focus then on the oral benefits that were found?
Yeah, so this is a good point. So obviously everybody wants fresh breath, and really whatever mouthwash you have is, traditionally has been that kind of approach. But they had a competitor, and it was Sozodont, and Sozodont was rocking it. They had really creative advertising. They were, using images of the recently crowned Tsar of Russia. Again, this is still in the late 1800s. And they were saying, if you're anybody and if you are of a certain status, you should be using Sozodon to keep your breath fresh, right? So that's what they were doing. But Listerine wanted in on that. I should say the Lambert Pharmacol company wanted in on that because by 1894, Sozodon's sales of mouthwash was like $10 million. Like
$10 million
yeah,
in their day.
in their days. I mean, it was really, really popular. So that was one of the reasons why the pharmaceutical company said, "Well, wait a minute, let's focus on this." And by the way, they weren't termed mouthwashes back then. Like, and even the Sozodont, it was red colored. They would call these liquid dentifrices. And there, I think the Sozodont also had about 40% alcohol content in the mouthwash. That's quite a bit. That's
That's a really, really high
It's like 80
alcohol.
proof, you can get that off the shelf. You can go to a bar or something.
You're in my
No,
mind at
yeah,
that point.
yeah, exactly.
Did the original Listerine then have the high alcohol
You
content?
know what? I don't know if they ever had it as high as 40% for the mouth. Maybe they did. I don't know. I didn't look that deep into that part of it. But whenever the original Cool Mint came out, and so if you're able to see these are more of like a blue or bluish green color. The original one was more of a yellowish. It had, just looked like lemonade or something,
Okay.
more politely instead of like urine or something like that. You know what I mean? I know maybe that's what you were thinking.
Okay.
Maybe
Nope.
not.
But
Maybe
yeah.
that's just what I was thinking. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The alcohol content was about 26.9%. But then they lowered it. They've been lowering it and it kind of ceased whenever they got down to about 21.6. And so most of the trials on this weren't done in the 1920s or the 30s or the 40s. They were done in the 70s and in the early 80s.
Much later
And
then.
again, yeah, much later then. And remember when we talked about the origins of the FDA monographs back in the earlier
Okay.
episodes, we said, hey, in 82, they had calls for monographs and what
Mm-hmm.
we could do for any kind of, products that might be able to help, in the oral environment as well as everywhere else in the body. But that kind of stuck. So whenever they had it at 26.9 and then they lowered it down to 21.6, that kind of stuck. So that's the range right now that is legit for the OTC monograph for anti-plaque, anti-gingivitis products that are mouthwashes that use an essential oil and alcohol combination.
So up to 21.6.
Or yeah, up to 26.9.
26.9.
Yep,
Okay.
26.9 as low as
21.6.
21.6. Yep,
Okay.
that's right.
Okay. So is it possible then to, via the monograph, use the essential oils without alcohol?
Yeah, now that's a very good question. Okay. One can use alcohol with the essential oils. All right. That's
Okay.
going to be stipulated in the OTC monograph. There's rules for that to make the anti-plaque, anti-gingivitis claim. That claim can only be done whenever those two are used together.
So the essential oils and the alcohol.
That's right.
So that's good to know. So then specifically, what claims are allowed then when you use those two?
And this is a really interesting point, and this is actually a really great time to talk about this. We're going to look at the Listerine Cool Mint The one that's a little bit lighter in color, if you can see this in your video, and again, if you're listening, this is just a it's just a lighter blue green color, but it's definitely visually different, and it's called zero alcohol in here, and we are going to look at that one because this will give us distinct differences between what is on the label, how it's labeled, and the claims that are made.
Okay,
Okay.
makes sense. So we're going to start with the one with no alcohol.
That's right. So this is the zero alcohol. They call it the Listerine Cool Mint zero alcohol. So let's start going. What's one of the first claims that we have here? If we look at the front of the panel, there's a claim that says kills 99% of bad breath germs. And then it also says with a less intense taste. And the less intense taste is bold. And it's bold because, well, this doesn't have alcohol in it. That's one of the
Okay.
that's one of the testaments.
Okay, so let's talk about this claim. Do you think they have testing then to support that?
Absolutely. Here, I believe they performed a kill test. Okay. I think an appropriate model for this test, because there are variations on this, would be the ASTM E as an elephant 2315, also called the suspension time kill. And there are reputable firms that can perform this. If you're listening, you might already be familiar with this. If not, you can always reach out. We have those firms that we prefer. What's another one here? Another claim on the label, and this is again on the front label, for a fresher and cleaner mouth alone than brushing, or than brushing alone. Either way.
So is there any testing there that can be done to support that?
Yeah, I think they very likely ran at minimum a short-term clinical comparing, toothbrushing with whatever standard toothpaste. They probably use some kind of Colgate or Crest, something that was very basic, could be MFP or sodium fluoride, and they brushed, and then you would use the mouthwash after,
Okay.
usually for about 30 seconds. That's the designated treatment time, and that's the time called forth in the OTC monograph. So they probably had two cohorts, one that had toothbrushing with that mouthwash, and then one that only had toothbrushing. And then they were able to, clinically via a dentist or some examiner to look and see, hey, was the plaque removed?
Okay.
And so that's likely what they did. The duration of that plaque study could vary, right? It could be, I've seen some of the plaque reducing studies to be only one brush, let alone all the way out to 3 months or even 6 months. So it could have been 3 weeks, it could have been 2 weeks. I don't know. We
Okay.
won't know those details. They're not bringing too much attention to that, but I imagine they have some type of short-term clinical study to back up whatever that claim is, if it ever becomes questioned. Now we have the back panel.
Okay.
Proven to kill millions of germs that cause bad breath on contact.
Okay. Well, the word kill is in there, right? So this sounds like the kill test may have been used.
Yes, I agree. And they probably did it not only just on one kind of pathogen. In these kill tests, you usually only do one microorganism at a time, whether you're looking at a mold or a yeast or a
Right.
bacteria. Maybe they looked at S mutans, and then maybe separately they looked at Porphyromonas gingivalis as an
Okay.
example. So I would imagine they probably have at least two tests about that. And they may even have some additional clinical data on file too. So maybe
Okay.
during that study when they were looking at with the cohorts and the toothbrush plus mouthwash versus toothbrush alone, they may have sampled some of the plaque and then also just assessed it just to see what survived. I don't know, but that could be a possibility. But I imagine they have some kind of support for that
Okay.
claim. And then finally, what's the one that we have there? From the number one dentist recommended brand, and there's an asterisk. And if you scroll down and look at the asterisk, it'll further tell you that it's among OTC mouthwashes.
Okay. So I'm guessing the way you get this one then is through consumer panel testing.
Absolutely. That's also an important part of building a dossier for your product. It's not just about efficacy, it's not just about safety. You can also do it through polling, right?
Makes
Whether
sense.
it's like the taste test, remember Coke versus
Yes.
Pepsi or anything else.
I remember those
Those
challenges.
are very important testings that you can still do for your mouthwash. So I think that's really important for our listeners, right? You can have polling questions of your consumers. You should have safety testing. I highly recommend that.
Right.
If for nothing else, you can also say it's been proven to be safe. There's nothing wrong with making a claim like that, especially if you have the data. And then, of course, you have efficacy data. So there's these like three categories, the three silos of data that I
Hmm.
think that can be approached, in a very strategic manner, depending on what your product is and what
Yes.
claims you're trying to go for.
They also have the statement. Says to help prevent and reduce plaque and gingivitis, use Listerine, and it's a trademark, Listerine. And they have antiseptic mouthwash, and the antiseptic mouthwash, they're actually capitalized. Those, so the Listerine antiseptic mouthwash is all capitalized as if it was the actual name.
That is right. I think this is super clever. This is very, very clever. Now, because they speak to the word antiseptic,
In little
and
print.
in little print, but it is brought forth. Do you see antiseptic anywhere else on the front label or even on the back label?
No, it's not on the front or the back, except for that one
Except for
little
that
itty bitty
one
mention.
spot back here. So that's done deliberately. Okay. So here, Kenvue, that's now the manufacturer of Listerine. Remember, it was the Lambert Pharmacol, then it was the Warner Lambert,
Yes.
then it was, all these,
Yeah.
Pfizer, Johnson, all these,
Iterations.
all these iterations, right? It's, they keep changing corporate names like the Starship song, right? We built this city. So, I mean, but that's almost how it is, right? Anyway, the whole point is the companion product that we're going to be looking at, does that have antiseptic written anywhere over it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right there on the front under the name.
Under the name Listerine Coolman Antiseptic. So, what I think is going on is I think that they're trying to direct because they're saying to prevent and reduce plaque and gingivitis, use this other product.
They're using one product to promote another.
Yeah, they omitted the word other from this statement. But do you see any active ingredient panel
Oh no.
on this zero alcohol? There is no active ingredient panel. Is there an active ingredient panel on the other mouthwash
Oh yeah.
that has alcohol? Yes. And so you cannot get away on the front of this and on the back of this Listerine Cool Mint Zero Alcohol mouthwash. There is no even contemplation about plaque. You don't see plaque.
No.
You don't see gingivitis
No.
anywhere on this product. But what they did very cleverly, because they already have commercial knowledge. People know about the Listerine brand and they already have a
Yes.
whole separate product devoted to this. They say, look, if you want anti plaque and anti gingivitis claims, don't use the zero alcohol, use the alcohol plus the essential oil combination.
That's very clever.
Okay, I think that that is really clever. This is all part of the marketing gamesmanship. These are, strategies that are sometimes used to try to, create yet a different brand. And again, they're trying to say, look, less intense taste. They're trying to say, look, you can still get some benefits here.
Mm-hmm.
These are going to be cosmetic benefits, but again, we're saying it's a cosmetic benefit. Do you need data to support cosmetic claims?
Yes, you still do.
Yes,
If
you
you're
still
testing
do.
it,
Yes, too many times you can, well, I'm not making a drug claim. I'm not making a drug claim on my product. I
but
just
you're
want something
saying
good.
it.
But you're saying it. So if you're going to say something,
Have data.
you better have data. I don't care if it's a drug claim, device claim, cosmetic claim,
Can't
all
just
that
say
other
it.
stuff. You can't just say it. So I
Okay.
think that is a wonderful example.
Okay, well, let's talk about then the ingredients that are in the zero alcohol one.
All right. Yeah, excellent. We'll go right down the list. First, we established that there are no declared active ingredients. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So then the first listed active ingredient should be water. Is that right?
Yes, the
Okay.
base. Now that's clearly, and is likely around 50%, perhaps more,
I agree. What's the next one? It looks like it's sorbitol.
which would be, you've taught me, humectant and sweetener, probably around 20-30%.
Yeah, that's right. So the humectant, the purpose of the humectant, of course, again, is to prevent things from drying out. Usually you find that in a toothpaste, but there's no reason why that cannot also be applied to a mouthwash.
Okay.
It's also done for some sweetness and some body like that. Sometimes these sweeteners like glycerin and sorbitol, they go really well with flavor oils and stuff. So
Okay.
I'm not surprised that that is in there. Propylene glycol is the next one, isn't it?
That is, I believe, a solvent to help solubilize or incorporate, right, any of those oil-based flavors.
Yeah, that's right. Some people might even refer to it as an emulsifier,
Okay.
but that's what it is. It's a solvent. And it may also build some body. Now, I would expect the content to be less than 1.5%, probably in this product around maybe 0.4%. Again, I'm guessing here
Okay.
based on our knowledge of mouthwashes and
Right.
formulas and working with these things, but that's just my estimate. The next one I think is Paloxamer 407.
You love this ingredient.
This is a fantastic ingredient. This is a synthetic non-ionic polymer. Okay, so this isn't a natural thing, but not all natural things are bad.
Mm. So
Goodness.
this 407?
Okay.
I know you love it.
Yeah, so this has blocks of polyethylene oxide and polypropylene oxide. We call these block copolymers because they're blocks of similar species, like chains of it, like PEO, next to like a Lego block, if you will. I am trying to create the visual of polypropylene oxide, and they're stuck together. With respect to the proximers, usually have a sandwich. And if you can imagine, let's do a bologna sandwich just because it's simple. The bologna is going to be the PPO, and the pieces of bread on either side are going to be the PEO. And so
Okay.
all of the time, this is what we're talking about. So if you ever hear of a Ploximer 188, sometimes that's used. Ploximer 407, of course, and then, but there's a whole host of them. That's why these are used. So
Okay,
I
so
think that helps.
definitely. What is the role of this? One of your favorite and one of this magical ingredient or this ingredient.
Yeah, well, first of all, so the 407, it's a little misleading. Like if you were to purchase this, you would probably source it from BASF. They have a pluronic
Okay.
F127. The F refers to the fact that it's in a flake format. So it is a solid. Some of these can be pastes, some of these could be liquids, and so then you would either have P for paste or L for liquid. That's hard math, right? But in this particular one, with the F127, the molecular weights, or actually the number of chains, are 100, 65, 100 for PEO, PPO, and PEO. And the seven, if we go back to the 407, the seven refers to the proximer then having about 70% weight of PEO. And then the molecular weight of the PPO is around 3,800. They rounded up to 40. Divide by 10, you have 40. And anyway, this is just how they label it. Nobody, if you want more information, you can obviously Google this stuff. But, the 407 refers to the F127 marketed, manufactured and sold by BASF. It's an excellent thing.
Why is it important?
Yeah, so this is a really important. It can act as an emulsifier, maybe even a surfactant. It can help protect molecules, but it can also lead to some instability if you're not careful with the loading level. So this one, we love to use it. One of the reasons why we love to use it, you can still get a little bit of foaming, and it helps deliver the active ingredient better to the tissue. So it acts in that way, kind of like an adjuvant. I know surfactants are supposed to reduce surface tension and also help deliver stuff, and they do, and there's lots of different choices to make. But polyoxamers do this really well while still retaining maybe oil phases within a water
Okay.
phase. Um, and of course, trying to maybe not interfere with certain ions that you want to keep separate for whatever reason.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that the level here would probably be modest, maybe 1% at most. We've used a lot less because we're using cetylpyridinium chloride here, or sorry, in this particular product, it's the essential oil alcohol combo.
Yes.
They could probably get away with a little bit more, but if you were to use CPC, and we'll talk about that one of the other mouthwashes, you might want to lower that a bit. So I
Okay.
I think that a lot of the formulation's power, its magic, its mystique, is locked into these poloxamers. So if you haven't used the poloxamers, if you've seen this and you've been wondering it, know that this is a magical ingredient. I'm going to call it a magical ingredient
Yes, you love it. Absolutely.
because, and anybody who has ever worked with it would agree with me, I'm sure.
Mm.
If you haven't worked with it, you might want to consider that.
Okay, well, the next ingredient is sodium lauryl sulfate.
Okay, so sodium lauryl sulfate. So this is really important because they're still trying to get these breath germ kills,
Okay.
and detergents can do that. You know, this is the scrubbing action, and they love to go after fatty substances. And well, bacteria have some fatty membranes. I mean, that's just what their cellular makeup is. It's a little bit sugar, a little bit fat, a little bit protein. It's a little bit of all this stuff, but it can help remove some of the bacteria. Years ago, back in the 60s and 70s, they were showing these things. And in fact, some of the original advertising that were out with the Colgate products, even the Procter and Gamble products, so many different products, they would say that it's powered by enzymes or enzyme busting ingredients. That was just sodium lauryl sulfate. And at one point in the construction of the monograph, and we're referring to the 2003 tentative, it's not because it's proposed, it's hasn't been officially final, but you should probably adhere to it because at least it's a directive. 22 years on, trust me. They at one point they were considering the combination of poloxamer and sodium lauryl sulfate as a possible anti-plaque, anti-gingivitis ingredient.
Oh, wow.
So
That's big.
if we were to look at this on like a, like what's the absolute best, you would say alcohol essential oils, stannous fluoride, or cetylpyridinium chloride. Again, according to the FDA monograph.
Right.
Some of the next best, well, you're going to start seeping in some different ingredients, like maybe some paloxamer, maybe some sodium lauryl sulfate, maybe even some other types of fluoride, not the stannous fluoride, but other fluoride, and maybe some zinc compounds. You never know.
Well, I'm guessing somewhere on this list, we're going to get to something that's active like, right?
Yeah,
I mean, somewhere.
yeah, absolutely. What's the next one?
Eucalyptol.
Yeah, eucalyptus, boom,
Okay.
eucalyptus oil. Okay. So they don't list the level, but I bet it's comparable to the approved active level of 0.092%. This, by the way, is a terpene.
Okay. Okay. Next, we have benzoic acid.
Right. This is part of the preservative system. So before there was a lot of push to use parabens. Now there's more of a drive because of some concerns about parabens having some cancer like,
Oh, well, that's a concern.
side effects, I mean, it is going to be a concern, so let's just do without. Those are very powerful antimicrobials, but there's other things that can be used. Benzoic acid is one of them, and usually you have combinations of preservatives. Usually you don't just put in one ingredient.
You usually say
I
there's
say,
two.
usually, but there's certain instances where one is enough, But in this particular case, if you're dealing with some of these types of small organic acids, some of these small organic salts, like benzoic acid, you probably need to couple that with another ingredient.
What level would that usually be around?
Maybe 0.05%.
Okay. Then the next one we have is sodium benzoate.
Yeah, so
So
that's the salt form.
another
Yeah.
preservative,
So
right?
that would be the companion match, right? So that's sodium benzoate. Some people may have heard of sorbate. Maybe they see potassium sorbate or sodium sorbate. Oftentimes, this is used in bread to help preserve the shelf life,
Okay.
right? And again, that's what these things are used. Oral formulators out there, please try to avoid sorbates, okay? Because sorbates can give you unwanted color changes over time, especially
Oh,
during stability testing. If you're going at higher rates of temperature, right? If you're accelerating at 40 degrees or higher, or even if you're in a climate that it's going to be over 90 degrees, because you're thinking about the shipping and the storage of all this stuff, right?
okay.
You're going to get off target reactions that will lead to discoloration. So your beautiful white toothpaste, if you make it, if it has sorbate in it, there's a chance it could turn pink, even a brown, something
That's not,
unattractive,
yeah, that's
and
not good.
definitely not white. Is that a guarantee all the time? No. Am I knocking sorbates? No.
Right.
But if you want to
Just,
minimize your risks
it's
and if you want to
caution.
minimize the effort that you're putting in,
Right.
avoid the sorbates. So I think this was a great choice using benzoic acid and sodium benzoate. And again, they use similar concentrations probably.
Okay, so I'm curious because you just mentioned that when doing preservative systems, you should usually use, uh, there's usually two parts. You like to use two parts.
Two parts.
So when
And
formulating, is it okay to add those at the same time or combine those together?
I would strongly recommend first treating the benzoic acid first. Have your separate pot if you're going to do that, but use hot water. I'm not just talking about 60 degrees C. I'm talking at least 80 degrees C, maybe closer to boiling because you
Okay,
want this to dissolve quickly. And
okay.
the benzoic acid struggles a bit. So again, do you have to use really high temperatures like that? If one thinks that it's high,
Mhm.
no, you don't have to, but you better build in your time that it's going to take for that to dissolve because
There you go.
you might struggle. See,
Maybe just
little
a little tip and trick,
little
maybe.
yeah. So this is a very helpful trick, I think, if you're if you don't know about a lot of these formulas or you haven't made something like this, but very important to consider.
And dissolving it in the hot water doesn't compromise its efficacy or
No,
anything like
not
that.
at all. Mm-mm.
Okay, well, moving on, we have methyl salicylate.
Ah, the root beer like flavor. Yes. So this is also part of the essential oil system, right? This is part two of
Okay.
it. And I think they may use around 0.06%. Again, that's what's in the active version of the essential oils plus the alcohol. So I would imagine they might use something similar. Keep in mind that methyl salicylate is a benzoate ester. Chemically speaking, it's not a terpene.
Okay. Okay, I wouldn't have thought that, but okay, the next is thymol. Isn't there another essential oil found in
Yep,
this drink?
absolutely. That's the third one at a level around 0.064. If it's an active ingredient, they're calling for it. Now, are they using that? I don't know. It's probably right around there. and that's also a terpene. And I think that's a good choice to use that. They're trying,
Okay.
see what they're trying to do is they're trying to follow through with the story, right? They're still using essential oils, I think, in a creative way to help kind of bridge and help, make sure that this entire brand has this kind of homogeneity, if you will,
Okay.
right? The messaging is still clear,
It
right?
carries through.
Carries through.
Next one is sodium saccharin.
Got to have a little sweetener, have to. A little goes a long way. I'm guessing they probably use 0.08%, but I'm sure it's anyway less than zero point 0.1.
Okay. Menthol is next.
Yep.
I'm guessing that would be because there's four essential oils. That would be
Yep.
the fourth.
That completes the quartet, you bet. And I imagine it's at the labeled level for active ingredients at about 0.042.
You really like using menthol, right?
Yeah, and I'm not the only one. People that are in the formulation business with respect to oral care products and stuff, they know that there's a nice pop, there's a nice aftertaste. And there's ways of actually increasing that essence. We won't talk about in this one, but there are other ingredients that can help that. Menthol is one of the primary ingredients that's in peppermint oil. So if menthol
Okay.
directly is not used, then peppermint oil is. And that's one of the reasons why you see a lot of products have peppermint oil because it gives really nice after effects whenever you use
Like
it.
that cooling,
Yep,
right?
has a nice cooling, has a nice pop, maybe has a lingering effect,
Okay.
and it can try to mask some of the more bland or more bitter types of
Mm-hmm. Ingredients.
ingredients
Mm-hmm.
that might be in there. Like, because not all the essential oils have that nice pop. Some of them, especially like with spearmint oil, you have to be careful. There's a sweet version of spearmint, and then there's also the more bitter, spicier
Yeah.
version, right? So,
Yes. And so the next ingredient on the list, of course, is always loaded, I think, but it's one word, flavor.
yeah, this is really important because this is called out specifically. They may have worked with a flavor house. Somebody on the order of like Callison's, for instance. I believe they're based out of Washington, I think, or Oregon. I can't remember. They're in the Northwest. Awesome company. They're really good at making the different flavor systems that are used by some of the major brands that you might be familiar with. But we won't talk more about that right now. But that flavor could encompass other terpenes as well. Terpenes are a nice solvent system. So you might say, well, what kind of terpene would they use besides like menthol that we just talked about?
Right.
They might use something like limonene.
Okay.
Okay. But they also might put into that flavor system citric acid in order to enhance some different, maybe acidic
Yeah, I always
or
think flavor
biting,
is loaded.
sour. Yeah, it is, and I there could be some preservatives in there. There could be some other pH modifiers in there, but traditionally, flavor houses don't like to reveal their secrets and what that flavor is. They keep that as a trade secret. It's proprietary.
Okay.
So sometimes, or it's either a choice of them, or if it's an exclusive flavor to
Yes,
that
that makes
brand, then the
sense.
brand's going to keep it exclusive.
Okay, so next is sucralose, which is another sweetener, right?
Yes, and I'm not surprised as this can also help sometimes, ease the bitterness and actually enhance the cooling effects of oil sucralose. Could be anywhere between zero point zero 0.03 and 0.08%. I'm guessing less than 0.04%. Doesn't really do much to raise the sweetness profile in the formulations that we've worked with. Maybe zero point zero 0.04 is good, but if you start going lower than that, you really have to have something else to really boost it. I'm not saying that you couldn't.
Right.
Maybe it's tucked away in that flavor,
Ah, yes,
umbrella
yes.
ingredient.
Okay, then green three. Green
Green
is
three.
green three.
Yeah, green three. Yeah, it's very
Okay.
specific, right? So that's for the color, obviously. So that is what's giving it this aquamarine like color, if you will. And but again, it depends on the source because you might use 0.01% or you might use 0.001% to get that same shade, but from two different suppliers or three
Right.
different
Okay.
suppliers of that green. So typically, if you have a supplier that has a color and that you like to keep with that, you should probably just keep with that, unless that's
Yes.
discontinued for some reason. We've had a product a blue color that we've used. We tested like at least three or four different versions, and we used one
Completely different.
from Omnia that we put in at 0.001%, and man, it got nice
It
blue.
was beautiful.
Somebody might say, golly, that's a really low amount. It is a really
I
low
was
amount. It
shocked.
doesn't take much. But if you use, again, a different source, you might have to use like zero point 0.1 or even zero
Yes.
point 0.3, you know, And especially if you're talking about maybe some alternatives, maybe some natural alternatives to some of these colorings, then you might have to use a little bit more. So,
Okay. Well, as far as ingredients, that's it. Is there anything else that we should know about?
well, I think based on the nature of the company that produces this stuff, they likely have excellent laboratory and clinical testing for this product, including possible bad breath clinicals that include you looking at halitosis metrics like are you evolving methyl mercaptan or hydrogen sulfide? They probably also have that, data. Why? It's just part of what they do. It's just part of their brand, part of their MO, right? Their modus operandi, and that's important to them. Any other lack of claims on here, because again, there's no anti-gingivitis and there's no
Right.
anti-plaque on here, that's probably a decision to either, well, it could be a combination in the mix. They want to minimize their risk level, or maybe they want to have something else keeping in mind if they ever wanted to maybe have a new drug application. Who knows?
Okay.
Who knows? I'm not saying that's the case for this, but there's many different reasons why they wouldn't necessarily disclose all at once or try to overstate their claims. They may reserve some stuff for,
Being
a
strategic.
future, yeah, a future purpose. That's right.
Okay. Well, that was a lot of ingredients. Moving on. Can we do the actual coolant antiseptic? Since this product appears to be what is actually referenced in the zero alcohol. So it's almost like they're these are for the wimps almost. Like these are for
Yeah.
the ones that just don't like that
Oh,
bite as much.
so you can't handle your alcohol, huh?
There
All
we go.
right.
So
Yeah.
the alcohol, the
It's
really,
like Michelob Ultra Light, right? It's
oh
like
goodness.
oh my God, that's not beer, right? That's not alcohol. Yeah, go ahead. Anyway.
So first, we noted before there is an active ingredient panel listing and quartet of essential oils we discussed above.
Yeah, exactly. And the content is clearly stated. How much is it? 21.6, I believe it should be. That's going to be down in the inactive ingredient panel. Whenever it's listed, it won't be actually up with the other essential oils. It'll be listed down in the other ingredients, like the inactive ingredients, and it will be 21.6. And again, that's consistent with what the allowed OTC range is for alcohol plus essential oil combinations.
Okay.
Again, is limonene part of what's allowed by the OTC? No. So if you were to take out menthol and put in limonene, are you correct?
No,
Exactly. If you were to take, I don't know, spearmint oil
they're very
and
specific.
replace the methyl salicylate with spearmint oil, carvone, in other words, would that be allowed?
No.
No. So it's very important that these four essential oils. Now, can you increase the menthol rate level to zero point 0.1 instead of where it's presently at?
I'm going to say yes.
No, you cannot even do that either. No, you have to keep within these levels. These levels have been tested. This is what has been approved. Again, it goes back
It's very
to
tight.
all the data that was ran,
Okay.
collected, all the clinicals and stuff that were run in the 70s and, and again in the 80s. And even it still goes on today. It's went on in the 90s, the 2000, and it just still goes on. So I think that's really important. If they were to change the level, or if they were to admit or replace an essential oil for one of the other ones, or just add one on and say, hey, four is good. I want to add another one. NDA for a new drug application,
Wow.
if you want to have that tested, at any rate, you wouldn't be able to put that on the active ingredient panel. Now, if you have five essential oils in there, but you're not calling forth that fifth one because it might be limonene and it might be part of the
Flavor.
flavor, then you can still claim your four essential oils. Keep that fifth one locked into the flavor.
So
Okay.
that's clever.
That's the gamesmanship.
Okay.
Okay. So I think that that's important. So anyway,
Okay.
yeah.
So
So let's go on.
the
Yeah.
next ingredient's water, as you'd
Yes.
expect, and then followed by alcohol at 21.6. So you're right, alcohol is included and at the lowest end of that range.
Boom. That's right. The next two ingredients are what? Sorbitol and then Ploxamor 407.
Yes. And we discussed those above.
Yeah, we did that, right? So sorbitol again is replacing the glycerin, or it can be here. Sorbitol is also used just like it was initially, same purpose. So benzoic acid is the next one, right? Yeah, I think so. Yep, and we discussed that
Yes.
previously. And if I'm looking at the next one, it looks like it's sodium saccharin
Yes.
again. If you're using If they use benzoic acid, they probably also
The
used,
sodium benzoate?
and did they do that?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the second part of it. Did they have a flavor umbrella that they're calling forth?
They did actually.
They did. Again, it's not detailed. We talked about that. And then they have green 3. Again, just like the other one.
Of course. But the green color of this is definitely distinct from the
Oh,
zebra
it's
alcohol.
much deeper, right? It's much deeper. Yeah, it's a different color. What do you think about that?
Well, I this one has zero alcohol. It's lighter, so maybe they're just saying it's not as strong or not as intense. And
Yeah,
the darker color means it's much more intense.
from a cosmetic and like just a regular visual, that could easily be the case. I think there's also another regulatory based decision to do that. This has been changed. I mean, again, the original color used to be yellow, but they switched it all to this, deeper
Mhm.
aquamarine, it's kind of like more of a marine green, I guess, This is what people are familiar with having that cool mint antiseptic, what they might have been used to help differentiate and not try to raise issues about, hey, consumers are confused about which one you're looking
Okay.
at, the cool mint versus the, alcohol versus zero alcohol. I think that they did this to try to keep the integrity of this being an OTC drug. The antiseptic is the cool mint antiseptic is an OTC drug. This Listerine with zero alcohol is not an OTC
Okay.
drug. I think to further drive home that message, the color integrity was established there.
Those are great points.
All right, so based on this label of the antiseptic one, the one that is considered an OTC drug, are there any claims to discuss?
So on the back panel, I note that there's an ingredient panel that includes quote unquote uses and quote unquote other information, aspects that are absent from the zero alcohol.
Absolutely. You don't see any kind of this nice formal breakdown. It's nice, it's categorized, right?
Right.
It's not just a bunch of paragraphs. There are specific rules and how that should be outlined whenever, for the manufacturer, whenever they do that. You have to have the uses and the other information. Absolutely.
Okay, and on the front label, they clearly state anti-gingivitis, anti-plaque mouthwash.
Again, they're using the quartet of essential oils plus what?
Alcohol.
Alcohol, 21.6%.
But they also use the fresher and cleaner mouth than brushing alone.
Again, they're using the same claim that the other one had, so they likely had the same clinical type of testing.
Okay.
It might have been more rigorous. I'm going to say that it probably was.
Okay, so they
Initially.
also have the same 99.9%
They also have
cure and
that.
kill claim language at the top as well.
Yeah, but do you notice that they also had a comma here at the end of that claim and they say plaque and gingivitis kills 99.9% of germs that cause bad breath, comma, plaque and
And that's the
gingivitis.
change.
The other one said, it kills breath germs with a less intense taste. Okay.
Yeah. So it's
Right there,
differentiated.
those are the differentiating, claims. Now, do you think they still use the same kill test?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I believe that they did.
And
And
finally, what's last is this one actually has the ADA seal on it.
bingo. So this is next level approval. So they can only do this if they have provided 2 independent clinical trials, gingivitis plaque clinical trials that lasted 3 months or longer.
Okay.
Okay. Independent too. Again, different sites, and they did not have a hand in it. They could obviously fund it, but these are independent testings, okay?
Okay.
Along with any other requisite data. So they probably had some safety data too. They probably,
Mhm.
what's the toxicology, expectations. Now, alcohol in general is cytotoxic. I mean, it just is. I mean, even in the dental varnishes and everything else, you'll get a negative response if you have mammalian or, cells, include like rat cells or human cells or whatever, exposed to different levels of alcohol. That's expected. Just because it reads cytotoxic doesn't mean that it's bad. You just have to
Right.
have the ingredient
Appropriate levels.
information and just level, and there's certain expectations. So they
Okay.
probably have all of that data that they had to, again, form into their dossier whenever they submitted to
Yep.
the ADA.
So once they get that seal, does that seal last forever once they get it approved?
Well, there is, of course, an application fee, and that's going to cost a couple bucks. I think we
Of
talked
course.
about that earlier in some of the earlier episodes. And then you have yearly maintenance fees. So as long as you want to have the ADA seal still attached to your product, then you got to pay the fee.
Okay, and so, but I guess this is done presumably for consumer confidence, correct?
You know what? Yeah, remember the ADA came about with their seal whenever they were really trying to help bring some more order to the oral product landscape. It was absolute mess, right?
Snake oil type
Remember,
stuff.
we even talked about they even had a congressional hearing in the
That's
1950s,
right.
saying somebody needs to help. This is whenever the Federal Trade Commission got involved, right? Even to this day, you still have the National Advertising Division. It's not government based, but it's inspired by government,
Hmm.
but it's more of a self-policing among major brands, and they usually try to call people on the carpet if they don't have supporting claims. You know, is it as important now as it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago? Maybe, maybe not. But the point is, with the advance of the internet, there are so many more options, and consumers are going to sometimes want to try new things, right?
Right.
Hey, what's going on? Especially younger generations, right? We see the progressive commercials, right? They're like, you're going to turn into your parents, but you
Right.
don't, but your insurance doesn't have to, right? That's the whole thing. Some people are looking for ways to differentiate from the old guard, if you will.
Makes sense.
And so there's a reason why the ADA seal might still be having a hard time. It's hard to get that messaging across whenever e-commerce is so easy. You don't have to
Hmm.
even go anywhere and to be
Right.
able to sample things. And if, of
Have the
course,
influencers
if
and
yeah,
social
exactly.
media.
So it's just so that's going to actually eat in on, is the seal really important? It is still important. It's a good thing to have, but is it critical? No, because the consumer today wants a wide difference of things. Maybe they like the way this product tastes better, or maybe they just don't like big OTC or big pharma, and they just say,
Right.
"Hey, look, I support a grassroots or I support a small company because it has this type of ethos that aligns with me." So there's more options today. There's more avenues in
Hmm.
getting those options, and it is impacting the ADA. You still see your legacy companies support that. I think that's a good thing. Is it still important? Yeah, it's still important because you know that they're getting testing done.
I was going to say, that there's certain requirements to be able to get that seal. So that
Exactly.
that is still important.
It's still important. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, those are two very good examples involving the essential oils, either drug-based or not, because they either have the alcohol or not. So what about CPC?
Okay, well, let's take a look at this Parodontax Active Gum Health. And it has this like more of a bluish color if you're able to see it visually. This was marketed by GlaxoSmithKline. It was Beecham even before that. Again, company names change hands, and now it's Haleon. Okay, Haleon, the makers of Sensodyne, Pronamel, and all those other products. So, although the label still states GSK, this is a Haleon brand. Okay, or GSK, it doesn't matter. It's all coming from the
It's all
same
the same,
same
right?
family, right?
So on the back panel, I noticed that the active ingredient lists cetylpyridine chloride at 0.07%.
Boom.
And the corresponding disease, I believe, is anti-plaque, anti-gingivitis.
Exactly, as it should be, because this is one of the other ingredients approved in the FDA OTC monograph for anti-plaque, anti-gingivitis benefits. And you also see that they also have uses there as well as, other
Hmm.
information. But the uses, and usually the brand has a little bit of flexibility with this.
Okay.
And here the uses is going to just vary just slightly different from like what the Listerine did. But here they have helps prevent and reduce plaque that leads to bleeding gums and gingivitis. And they further explain that as an early form of gum disease.
Ah,
So
okay.
they can do that. These are the types of claims that you're allowed to make. Is it like, do you have to use this exact claim? Not necessarily. Again, the Listerine products didn't use that. They just said it's good for plaque and gingivitis.
Right.
Here they went a step further and said, hey, bleeding gums, and they helped to educate the consumer a bit to say, look, this is an early stage of gum disease.
That
That
makes
was their
sense.
decision. That's fine.
Okay, so other information is also provided similar to the Listerine antiseptic mouthwash.
Boom.
And as for the ingredients, I see the following, which first is going to be water, right?
Yeah, at least 60%, maybe up to 75%.
Okay, then there's glycerin.
Yeah, so instead of using sorbitol, we talked about it, they use glycerin. Again, it's a humectant and sweetener. We like using glycerin, works really well with CPC-based formulations. One of the reasons is it's already a liquid, mixes really well. Sorbitol is typically solid unless you source it as like a 70% in water solution, but then you got to calculate for the water content. And so, again, it all depends on what you like. if it's already liquid and you're making a mouthwash, I like to just use that.
That makes sense.
Now, sorbitol can also lead to some other effects, especially like xylitol. Like if anybody were to ever dissolve pure xylitol in water, they'll notice a marked cool down.
Yes.
Again, sorbitol also can cool things down, but that might also adjust the temperature of the whole mixing,
Okay. Yeah.
procedure that's used to make the mouthwash. We talked about how important it is for benzoic acid to
Yes.
have a higher temperature whenever that's dissolved. If you put sorbitol in there, or somebody got creative and said xylitol, well, if you're not paying attention, that might lower the temperature. You might not get complete dissolution. If you were to add benzoic acid to that system, you might have to keep that as a complete separate phase, and
Depends on when and where you add
yeah,
it
it
in the
just
formula.
depends. So there's nuances here, right? So it's not only, well, what phase do I like liquid or solid? It might be, well, where is this coming into the formulation phase?
Yes.
Some people or some manufacturers or formulators, they have different pots. We like to use
Yes.
pots. At other times, we like to add ingredients singly
Hmm.
because we want to make sure that we have dissolution and we want the reaction to
Want
be
to
able
confirm
to,
that it happened.
confirmed. Yeah. So these are just some of these differences. It's probably at a level between 25 and 35%, if I'm
Okay.
guessing somewhere in there.
Okay. Well, our favorite flavor is listed
Boom. So
next.
that's next. So that could have a lot of different things, right?
Okay.
And we're not too surprised. Now, again with the flavors, we didn't talk about it too much on the other ones, but this is just a general term for or general point. For aqueous-based formulations, generally a good idea to not exceed about 1.5%. Why? Adverse events. You might start getting irritations in the mouth.
Okay.
Some stuff that can happen with maybe certain combinations of baking soda. We talked about that. Either alone or if you put
Hmm.
like a sodium percarbonate in there to try to get an extra whitening boost or something. Some people are more sensitive to that. They'll blame the sodium lauryl sulfate. I mean, if anybody's going to blame the sodium lauryl sulfate, which is generally less than 1%, usually it's in 0.3% or point half, or a half a percent.
Right.
What about these other oils? That could be what's actually causing the sores in the mouth,
Right.
right? So here, although I'm giving you kind of like an upper limit, what I would think would probably be do not pass limit for flavors. I'm guessing they probably use a lot less.
Okay.
Maybe even zero point 0.3, maybe zero point 0.5.
Okay. So could this also, the quote unquote flavor, also include menthol?
Oh, yes. So remember, this could include your terpenes. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to call out these ingredients and say, is that a terpene or not? Because terpenes are solvents. And that could be one of the solvents that they use, limonene. Maybe not menthol per se, but there's other types of, essential oils that could serve as that. And even
Because
if
it's in flavor,
because
though,
it's in a
they
flavor,
don't have to call it out
yeah,
separately.
that is their decisions. They might have thymol in there, they might have limonene in there, they might have spearmint oil in there, and again, a flavor house might have created that flavor for them. So,
And
who
this is an okay
who owns that?
basis.
Yeah, now that is okay. Now, sometimes what happens is there's alcohol in the flavor base because terpenes mix really well with alcohol. In fact, even better than water. And mouthwashes are typically in a high water,
Yes.
formulation, you're going to want solvents that agree with that. Alcohol is one of those ingredients that naturally mixes well with water, right? So, is it okay to have alcohol in your formula and call it as part of the flavor? Absolutely. What's not okay is to call your product alcohol free, but yet you're still using and keeping alcohol in your flavor system.
So that's good to know because a lot of things can be quote unquote hidden within the flavor system.
Yes.
But if you're concerned, if you have a concern or you just simply don't want to use a product with alcohol, you can at least rest assured that you know that as long as it's an alcohol-free version, they haven't put included alcohol in the flavor system.
Yeah, but you're relying on that company to be forthright. This is another reason why sometimes it pays.
Interesting.
I know sometimes some of these conventional companies are not looked upon favorably. It's it's not an all or nothing proposition, right? They know they've been there before. They might have got their hand slapped, right? They might not have got their hand slapped, but it's all part of their ethos. We love this company,
Yeah,
right? I mean, we
absolutely.
we absolutely love this company. We work with this company. We worked with them for a number of years.
Even previously
I
from my
mean,
pharma days,
they're just
GSK is fabulous.
they're just fantastic. This isn't necessarily a plug for them, but we just know that we know about their ethos. It's just part of their ethos and stuff, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're gonna have to
Very
look
ethical.
at some of their oral care products. Not to say that they can't do bad, because of course some things happen,
Right.
and it just happens. But they're one of these companies, by the way, that are conducting, and are interested in doing studies to look at maybe possible links between diabetes and gum disease. And they're not, and that's just fundamental research that they're just supporting. They're not saying, hey, look, use our product because it'll help you fight your diabetes or it'll help prevent the gum, disease that may be generated because you have the diabetes, if there is in fact a correlation there, right?
So they're trying to
They're
genuinely
just,
understand the
this is
disease
just what they
state.
do. If they do clinical studies, they publish all their data. I will say this, not all consumer brand companies out there, especially those that are in the US, have that mindset, have that ethos. They don't always publish their data, even if it's an outcome they don't think is favorable for them.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that's really important. So boy, that got a little bit deeper though.
That's okay because
But
they're a
but it's
great
important,
company.
right? It's like,
Yeah.
well, how do you, if you're a
You can trust
consumer and
them
you want to know, well, hey, what products do I use? How do I go about making something? Who can I look up to even?
or
If you
researcher,
yeah,
right?
if you're a formulator, you have a brand, you're a manufacturer, and you're trying to say, well, I don't know what kind of claims I can make. I don't know what's going on. So many times, even contract manufacturers have at best an educated guess on what they
Right.
think the claims are allowed to be made onto a product.
Right.
Why do they have an educated guess? Because most contract manufacturers are not adept and they're not involved in getting these products tested for efficacy. They're not engaged in consumer test panels. They might do the bare minimum safety testing, but they're not going to give you all that all the time.
And that's safety, not efficacy.
Yeah, exactly. So, not to say that all of them do that or don't do that. We're just saying that this is one of the features. And then, of course, you have entrepreneurs or maybe a dental practitioner that says, hey, I want to have my own brand. And then
Right.
they jump into this. But again, there's not a blueprint to say, hey, look, this is what you need and why you need to do this,
Right.
right? This is why we're doing these formula forensics. This is why we're trying to educate this because this information just is not out there. This product, excellent product to model your product or understand what your product is, what's going on.
Nice. So, well, the next ingredient is Paloxamor 188.
Yeah, so instead of the 407, yeah,
Paloxamor.
exactly. We're going from the 407 to the 188. Again, it's just based on choice and probably comfort, maybe in terms of like, hey, well, we're used to using this, right? In this business, sometimes we talk about a chassis. What is the chassis that you like to use?
That's
You know,
basically the base formula.
Yeah, what is your core formula?
Okay.
Every one of the companies has this. If they have a number, if they're fortunate enough, right, to have a number of different brands, right, they probably
Yeah.
say, okay, well, we have our core formulation. We don't deviate from this silica or this water, this humectant, and this flavor. We start here and then we modify
From a
accordingly.
sourcing and manufacturing perspective, that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. So they probably started with 188, this Paloxamer, and have gone to it. Could they switch to a 407? Probably, but they may have to remake their formulation because of sensitivities. Why? Because it's a different ratio. This one is a 76-29-76, and there's 80% of PEO in this one, and the molecular weight, of course, of the PPO, it's around 1800, divide by 100 to get 1.8. So it's 1.8 with the 8, it's 188. Anyway,
Right there.
I think that the level, and this is again based on our experience, right, in working with CPC, is probably less than 0.3%. It could even be half that. It could be a third that, but that is our guess.
Okay, sodium saccharin is next.
Yeah, we know that's a good one. That works well with some of the CPCs. It can not work well. Also, again, depends on what that flavor is. It's really hard to make a formulation that has a flavor profile that you want while keeping the active ingredient
Yes.
highly bioavailable.
Yes.
There are companies out there, there are products in the marketplace. I don't care how smart you are, I don't care how big or small your companies are, that have products out there that do not have the stated level of bioavailable CPC. Or if we're talking about toothpaste, fluoride. This is a fact. This is not just, oh, Dr. Rob is talking about some stuff and everything else. Surely somebody would call them on it. They will eventually. If you get your business and your market share to be at a certain level,
Right.
you will be called forth.
Okay.
But I think that that's important to know. So somebody who says, "Hey, I just want a CPC mouthwash," pay attention.
It's a lot like fluoride. You have to make sure
You
the
have
right amount is
you have to
available.
make sure, and there's this huge interplay with the flavor, the sweetener, and the active ingredient, especially if you're using different surfactants. I think we said sodium lauryl sulfate and CPC, they kind of don't get along very well. And so if that happens, you're going to have reduced bioavailable CPC. We mentioned that I think in the previous podcast, right? In the
Right.
episode, because we were talking about the different CPC clinical
Exactly.
trials that were going on to show, hey, is there a marked benefit in the microbiome in the mouth, right? So anyway,
Next is propylene glycol.
yeah, similar to Listerine. Again, it's an emulsifier slash solvent. If you're using oil-based flavors, especially, it's usually helpful. However, it's usually not used alone. It might be, but have a poloxamer, but there might be another ingredient. You never know.
Okay. Sodium benzoate, which we talked about.
Yep, we're very familiar with that.
Sucralose is next.
Yeah, sucralose, we like this sweetness. They probably keep it less than 1%. I'm thinking, maybe, I don't know, it might even be less than 0.1% actually. Again, depends on the CPC and the other flavors. We've used sucralose at what levels? I mean, we've used it at zero point 0.1, we've used it
Super small.
even lower for other systems that are more sensitive
Yes.
to what we have. I think with the fluoride formulation, we even used it a lot less, right? I don't think we went lower than 0.04 for taste perspective, but we went that low. So
We had to.
so that's just an example. It could be that low, or it could be maybe 1%, but likely less than that.
Okay. Benzoic acid.
Boom, the partner in crime for the preservation. Excellent.
By the way, regarding preservative efficacy, what tests would you recommend to check for this stability against microbial contamination? Because you always talk about you
Yep.
like having a two-part system.
Yep, love having the two-part system. Two is better than one. Hasn't people said that a long
Okay.
time ago? Anyway, yeah. So having your formulation tested against the presence of bacteria, yeast, molds, things like that, and there are tests that are out there that are well established. It's just a great idea. Then you know that your system is going to be able to be resistant to that. I think that's important for, again, confidence, safety. It just makes everything.
Yeah, I'd like to know that my
It just
soup
makes everything
that I put in
better.
my mouth doesn't
Yes.
have mold in it.
Well, right, right. And so, typically what you would look at are preservation efficacy testing, PETs, they're called. Sometimes they say it's a little redundant whenever they go, well, I'm having PET testing done. It's like, well, I know everybody does it. But it's a challenge test. Sometimes instead of saying PET, they just say challenge
It's
test.
a Robbie
Yeah.
pet peeve.
Yeah, it's
Dr. Rob pet
no,
peeve.
I don't know about that.
Mhm.
But, there are generally three types of that challenge testing. I like
Okay.
to use and have used the ISO 11930 test. And again, we partner with the firm to do this testing. Sometimes if you find a good supplier for an ingredient, especially if they specialize in novel ingredients, maybe ones that are more nature derived or carry the nature derived moniker, that label, maybe they somehow got some approval. Some of these companies can actually perform some of that testing for you. So you
Oh,
don't have to actually try to find somebody to do that. We like that. We've also taken advantage of that. Awesome. Just not everybody does that, but some of the novel ingredient houses that do have, and they can have different preservations. They might even have some of the same ingredients that you already use. Like maybe they have their own glycerin, or maybe they have their own sorbitol, or maybe they have certain poloxamers. They might be able to offer this. So keep in mind of that if you're a formulator or if you're a manufacturer, because you might think, oh my God, that's just another cost. It's just going to add more time and stuff. Well, it's going to add more time. It is a cost, but depending on who you're working with, some of that could be subsidized in a really nice way. So I like the companies that do that. Anyway, these tests generally go out about 28 days and they actually physically inject the either bacteria, yeast, or molds. They use all three. They do that at different time points and then they monitor for their growth. If they grow too much, then it fails. If they don't grow much or at all, then it passes and you're in
okay.
good shape.
So
So,
is this
yeah.
test also required in the US?
You know what? Loosey goosey rules right now, but I think that's changing. It's definitely needed in the European Union. So funny because safety testing would be required in the European Union, But efficacy testing necessarily isn't like rigorous efficacy testing.
You see the look
They
on my
don't,
face right
yeah,
now.
because
You can see that.
it's like, wait a minute, what? So you can have fluoride in there and it cannot be available in your toothpaste overseas? Yeah, absolutely. But that's also why you should trust the name brands, the big brands, because they've been there, they have more to lose, they have to answer to more people and at a higher stake, right? Not to say you can't go with another brand. Goodness, you can still do that, but these are just things to consider, okay? These are
Some
just
little
things to consider.
pitfalls.
Yeah, so if you were going to have something maybe on like the Amazon Marketplace, or if you have you want to get into certain brick and mortar stores like a Walmart or Target, they might require that. But
Okay.
that's going to be dependent upon them, and we don't know because we don't represent those companies. But in the past, we've had some requests for certain testing. Maybe they want to know if there's heavy metal testing in it or something, you know. But are they really going to require the ISO 11930 test? Maybe not. I think that this is some of the changes that we will see coming about in the future here in the US because it's good practice.
It should be. It should be a practice. I remember one of our clients sharing some interesting information on one of their competitors regarding microorganisms growing in a preservative-free mouthwash that was available for online purchase. Let me just say, I think you said there was mold floating in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. The client,
That's gross.
yeah. They shared it with me. It's gross. It's it's just nasty, and I'm pretty sure they didn't have any pet testing. Again, the pet testing redundancy, the challenge testing. They didn't have efficacy data either. We already know this. It's irresponsible and present risks for the consumer and the company itself. And
Absolutely.
if they didn't pull it, they should. But again, there's loaded companies out there right now that are stressing. They keep on saying preservative free. Well, you're going to have something in there because
I'd rather have preservatives than mold.
thank you. And it's just one of those ways where some of these preservatives are natural or
Yes.
nature derived and they're not all bad. So I think that some people need to take a breath, you know, and say, okay, well, maybe not all preservatives are bad. And maybe this is why we need this because we have this really creative formula, but we really don't want to make anybody sick.
Right.
Because if you make somebody sick or if there's something going on, you just kind of trashed your whole image on what you're trying to do. So,
Create harm
anyway,
anyway. So the last ingredient we have here is blue one.
yeah, so that's similar to the green three, right? For the Listerine. Here we have blue one. They might have it at 0.001%. Again, we're basing that off of the source that we've used for the blue one that gets a color very comparable to this product. But again, it depends on the supplier. What is the source that you have?
Okay, so on the front of the label, there's some claim language.
All right, tell me.
It says targets bacteria with an asterisk and forms an antibacterial shield. What does the asterisk mean?
Yeah, usually that informs the consumer that there's a footnote somewhere, anywhere. Do you see it?
Yes, it's on the back panel and it states
Mm-hmm.
kills plaque bacteria associated with gingivitis and odor causing bacteria in a laboratory test, unquote.
Perfect. And I love that. Perfect, perfect, perfect. I love that because they call forth that they had a test. They're specific with what it is, and they said what kind of testing it was. It's a lab test. If they had clinical data and they wanted to refer to that, they would use clinical test. So many companies do not do that. One of the reasons why they probably do not do that is probably because they lack
They do not do the
efficacy testing.
testing.
Right, exactly. So for those that have it, I think it's a great idea to put that on there. It only adds to a next level of confidence
Yes.
for the consumer. And it also says, look, we did testing on this product. I think it actually elevates the brand and the brand's integrity,
Yes,
really. Not
absolutely.
only giving more confidence for the consumer, but the brand's integrity is increased. I love that.
Absolutely. So also in the front panel, there's another claim that refers to this same asterisk.
Let me guess, 99.9% germ kill.
Close. 90 kills 99.9% plaque bacteria, and that's in quotes.
Okay, good. So, and it has the asterisk, right? It
Yes.
has the asterisk right there again. So they're probably using the kill test
The
that we talked about before, and they probably did that. I would imagine maybe more than one test, maybe not, but they were using that and they're able to say plaque bacteria because they're using an active ingredient, CPC.
Okay.
right? If they weren't using an active ingredient, they would probably just say kills 99% of
Germs.
germs, right? That's
There's
more of a,
differentiation.
and again, just because it's a cosmetic claim, does that mean you can get away with no testing?
No,
No,
data is needed.
data is needed.
So we also perform some testing that would seem to allow for some additional claim language on the label, correct?
Absolutely. One of the things we do really well is we have an in vitro plaque glycolysis and regrowth method. And we perform this for various clients, some that we've already talked about. And, what that does is it assesses the ability of the microbes to produce acids, like lactobacilli
Okay.
fermenting sugar, to be able to produce the acids, or their ability to grow, if allowed to, after exposure to the treatment. Our model is unique because we don't do just one microorganisms, right? We sample our plaque. So you're getting a clinically relevant, native, more natural,
A good mixture of
good
that
mixture,
700
700 bacteria species,
species.
and you're exposing it to this product, and you're saying, okay, what is the response? Are bacteria growing, and then, or are they producing acids? We even, yeah. Anyway, if anybody really wants to know about that, they can always contact us. But they've added the asterisk there to again refer that they had some testing done. Very, very
We've
good.
done work with them, right? And they're just a very good and responsible firm.
Awesome, awesome firm. Yeah.
So let's do one more example.
Okay.
Although we don't recommend using it, since you have mentioned chlorhexidine in the previous podcast,
Yep.
it might be nice to better understand a bit more about this type of formulation, especially to those listeners outside the US.
Yeah, outside the US, you can get it pretty easily. Here in the US, prescription usually is how it's going to be.
For chlorhexidine
Yeah.
rinses.
For of the chlorhexidine. I mean, maybe you can find something OTC, maybe you can find something on eBay. I don't know. Who knows, right? Accessibility. I'm
Right.
not gonna stand here and say you can't get it, but you can get it. But is it pushed in the OTC market? No. Is it available prescription? Yes.
Okay.
And the one that I have here is just a brand new bottle here. I purchased this and it's by Darby Dental Supply. Okay. It's a US based company and their product is meant for prescription only because it actually says for prescription only on the label. It has 0.12% chlorhexidine. Although I know again outside the US, you can have some that are, I think I've seen zero point zero 0.08, maybe even 0.05. So you can have lower levels. It is available.
Okay, so the PI product insert is attached to the bottle because it is with all medications and or drugs, there has to be a product insert. Definitely prescription as the label reads for professional use only, and they don't really have any claims anywhere.
Exactly.
It's the ingredients though.
They do have the ingredients. Yeah. Again, with some of these prescription strength, they won't have a lot of claims. The claims are more so designated for the cosmetic and OTC
Okay.
products. So this is one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of marketing messaging on here because they're relying on the professional to actually share with you the
That makes
importance of
sense.
this ingredient, why you would use it.
Yes.
They're also relying on the dental professional or clinical professional, if this is a medical doctor, to understand what the product insert actually says and to be able to tell you, well, there might be untoward, effects from
Like
using this,
staining.
like staining. By the way, also CPC can stain. That's just something that one should be aware of.
Doesn't always.
Doesn't always, depends on the formulation. That's another thing, right? And so, you really need to brush as well. Is the staining permanent? Well, it can be, but usually it can come off at a dental cleaning or if you're using some kind of toothpaste.
All right, so let's
that's
go through
adept.
the ingredients then.
Okay.
Okay, so first, water, of course, is the base.
Yeah, probably at least 55%.
Okay, then alcohol, 11.6. I didn't expect that.
Right. So many of these chlorhexidine mouthwashes contain alcohol. No doubt increases the potency of the mouthwash. Remember whenever everybody's saying chlorhexidine's bad, and it is worse for the microbiome.
It's more broad spectrum.
It's more broad spectrum. Well, there's alcohol in there too,
Which is
likely.
kind of broad spectrum.
It's broad spectrum. Yeah. So if you're having chlorhexidine with the alcohol, it's probably going to be more damaging than just say, you know, I don't know, like a CPC aqueous based mouthwash,
That
right?
may also have alcohol.
Well,
Or no.
CPCs won't actually. There was, that's a good point. Originally, they did.
Oh,
Why? Because again, it's hard to dissolve flavor oils and sometimes some of these active ingredients into a water-based formula
Okay.
while keeping it stable, keeping the color, everything else. But since around 2000 or so, there's been a push, and now CPC is usually found in formulations without any alcohol.
Good to know. I didn't know that.
One of the reasons why that was made possible is that you're able to use peroximers. And so the use of
Okay.
peroximers has really I mean, they were invented long ago, but in oral care products, at least ever since 2000, they've been in use in various oral products. I think there's only going to get more use for them, but that kind of allows some of those oils to be mixed in very well with these formulations. So if anybody's interested in that, somebody said, I remember whenever CPC used to have alcohol. Well, it did, but it doesn't anymore, at
Okay.
least in many of the regular brands, that have actually shifted from alcohol.
Okay. So, but alcohol usually can be used with chlorhexidine, right? Then.
Yeah, I think that it probably helps its solubility, and I think it probably helps
Okay.
the mix of maybe some of the other flavor oils too in there.
That makes sense.
Especially, well, let's see what the other ingredients are. I'm
Let's get to.
guessing that if it has alcohol and it has some of these flavor oils, it might not have like a peroximer in it, just as a, for example.
Well, I know they have glycerin.
Yep. Okay. Well, that makes sense. You're going to need that. It's good, again, for the body, preserves the
Mhm.
moisture level, everything else like that. 25 to 40%, I'm guessing, is what the level is.
Peg 40.
Yes, a hydrogenated castor oil. Boom. That one
You got
is
excited.
going to foam up a little bit, right? That one's harder to work with respect to CPC. We've noticed some negative interactions. I know this, we're not talking about CPC here, but PEG 40 is one of those, or sometimes a PEG 20. They have different levels. But these castor oils sometimes were used instead of peroximers to help
Okay.
solubility, and they do foam up. They foam up even better than peroximers. So even if you use a little bit, you're going to get a high amount of foam. And some people like that foaming.
Okay.
So that's going to be, I would guess that it's probably no higher than 1%. So it obviously could be lower, but maybe it could be slightly higher.
Okay. Uh, the next on the list is sorbitan okay,
Isosterate.
distearate.
Yes, excellent. Another emulsifier, kind of like the polypropylene glycol. It's going to help with
Okay.
miscibility of the oils into the water. So they probably add that. And again, they probably use that as like a two-part with the PEG. Sometimes you'll see polypropylene glycol and the castor oil used concomitantly.
Okay.
In this particular case, are they using propylene glycol? Like, do you see it anywhere else in there? I don't think so, right?
I don't think so.
No. So what they did is they replaced that with the sorbiton diisostearate.
Okay.
It just probably gave a better taste and stability profile over time.
Okay.
At a level, I don't know, probably less than 1.5%. And I'm guessing maybe around 0.4% here,
Okay.
for this rinse.
Well, next is my favorite flavor.
Again, boom, we have a loaded ingredient. Probably no more than 1.5%. Who knows? But I'm guessing 0.3. Again, I could be totally wrong, but they might have different terpenes in there. Think of the menthols,
Right.
right? Think of the thiols. They could.
Sodium saccharin is next.
Which, by the way, I want to go back to that. Sorry to interrupt you. The flavor could also be imparting some efficacy benefits. So
Oh,
imagine if you have, okay, so we've been talking about, especially for the oral microbiome, right? You have chlorhexidine. We say, oh, chlorhexidine, probably stay away from that. Why? Well, as you're seeing here, you're taking something already potent and then you're adding alcohol to it. What if you took chlorhexidine, which is potent, alcohol, which is potent, and then you took a quartet of essential oils?
oh wow.
All of a sudden you're expanding its potency. And this is one of the reasons why maybe chlorhexidine mouthwashes might not be the best choice if you want to preserve your oral microbiome in the way that you want.
I
In
could
other
see
words,
that. It's
you
not
just,
broad spectrum.
well, it's not broad spectrum, but it's acting like it because you're stacking
Okay.
all of these ingredients. So
Okay.
that one is highly
I see
stacked,
what you're saying.
right? The CPC is not stacked. You don't have alcohol in here. You have only CPC. Yes, could you use some of those other oils? Absolutely. But we all know that those oils work best in combination with alcohol
Okay.
for those effects. Now, Listerine has also showed us they can make it with zero alcohol.
Right.
In order to compensate for that, what's one of the ingredients that they threw in there?
Oh, you got me.
Sodium lauryl sulfate
That's
to
right.
try to pump it up a little bit, you
Okay.
know?
That makes sense
And they're
then.
also using peroximer. So again, there's ways of stacking these ingredients to get a magnified efficacy benefit. If the benefit is good, then fine. But if there's some additional off-target results that are happening from these products, like a chlorhexidine rinse, which just might be stacked too much,
Right.
then, you might want to think about using that. But that's why we have to talk about these. If we don't talk about these, then somebody's not going to know and they're going to say, well, I think because comments have already been made about this. Stay away from mouthwashes. Your blood pressure will elevate. No, my blood pressure is going to get elevated because I'm frustrated with the mass lumping in of all mouthwashes with chlorhexidine versus alcohol
Not
containing.
created
They're
equal.
not all created equal. Goodness, man. And the differences are what makes everything special and unique. And we need to embrace that. Our differences are what
Absolutely.
are interesting. Chlorhexidine, a little too interesting, I think. So we need to not embrace that one as much.
Okay, that's fair. So the final one is for this chlorhexidine rinse. The final ingredient is FD&C blue one.
Yes. So, they're using FD&C blue. They may have to do that, or that just might be a choice that they make. Look, it's the same blue one that was used in the
It's just trying
over-the-counter
to sound
version
more fancy.
for the periodontics, and so it's just more of just a selection. By the way, for a little bit of sweetness, did they put in sodium saccharin? I think they did, right?
Oh, they did.
Yeah, I think they did.
They
So,
did
but
indeed.
again, we'll probably keep that low, just like the other ones.
They did. They did. Okay, so that was a lot of information, but it was super informative, both from an ingredient and a claim perspective. So I like the formula forensics for essential oils, CPC, or the chlorhexidine mouthwashes. That was all good stuff.
Indeed, these ingredients, we're talking about the active ingredients, we're talking about inactive ingredients. I just briefly mentioned at the end there the ability to stack these in order to get maybe a benefit clinically or even in the laboratory test that you want. It's all okay until it's not, right? So if
Right.
there's going to be certain concerns about an oral microbiome, well, maybe not have so many things stacked in the mouthwash. You know, we don't know that until we actually start looking
Looking
at
at
the
those
ingredients and
ingredients,
all this other stuff. You already know that I go to the store and I'm looking at all the labels. I've long done
they
this.
take you to the store,
Yeah,
especially oral care items like
I'm
I
unable to do that. Yeah, these quick trips.
forever.
Anyway, yeah. But this is, get your stuff tested. If you're a formulator, you're a manufacturer, you're a brand, whatever be the case is, get it tested. Know what its limits are for, at least. And then that will help shape your claims because if you can do that, then you're going to start building that kind of dossier that you want. There are a lot of companies out there that do not have adequate testing on their products. This is a very real thing, and the quality of the test matters. Okay. We will be
Yes.
talking about some models that have been used to test some dental products, and they don't have a negative control or they don't have a dose response control. This is a problem. Again, just because you're getting it tested
It
doesn't
has
mean
to be
that,
appropriate.
okay, well, I had it tested by somebody who's very good at a university. That's not enough, man, because it's always going to come down to what is that
You have to
model? What does
qualify
that
it.
look like? And so, doing some of these tests that we talked about with the preservation test and the time kill test, those are established models. They follow a recognized and established protocol. Everybody knows what's going on, right? Even the model that we use has been very good. It's recognized as part of what you could add to your dossier as part of the testing
Hmm.
for these types of products, according to the FDA monograph. It's very helpful, right? Okay, so we will continue to conduct these formula forensics on various products. Here it was mouthwashes, but we can do toothpaste. We're going to do some even that don't work well. So, that's just the facts of it. I mean, there's some stuff that works really well and there's some stuff that isn't. We will continue to do this and at the same time also address potential claim language. Why are we doing this? Because there's a lot of confusion or there's a complete dearth of information out there. What kind of claims can you make? And
Yeah.
so, I mean, we know this
It's kind
because
of all
I
over the
consult
place.
with this, right? I have the
Right.
clients, hey, I want to have a product. What can I put on the label? They want to put everything on the label. Don't quit, stop it. Don't put everything on the label. Okay. But anyway, these are really, really poignant topics. These are important topics. And these are probably a business success or, life altering, topics that we need to talk about because it can help shape directions. Anyway, all right. Alongside Tami, I am done monologuing here. The soapbox is now closed. I'm stepping off and we will sign off. Thank you for listening to the Dental Formulators Playbook. See you next time.
Thank you.